1. I work at an Asian restaurant, and I get a phone call from a customer who starts yelling at me about a delivery driver who didn't properly deliver the food. At first, I thought it was one of my co-workers who delivered the food, since we used to do that in the beginning of the pandemic. But it wasn't. It was a Grubhub driver. What had happened was that the driver had picked up the food from the restaurant and brought it to the customer's apartment building, but apparently the customer was taking too long and he had left with the food, which was a bad choice because he could have just left it with the front desk instead of driving away with the food. I asked the customer which delivery service he used, and he said Grubhub, and started yelling at me about the delivery driver. The thing is that with delivery apps, you can't really pick and choose who can come and get the food. It's always just the one person who is available. When I mentioned that to the customer, he still yelled at me about how I was trying to insist that he was the one in the wrong. Which was not true, but I decided to tell him that I would be calling the delivery driver to make the ride back to the customer. And after that, we ended the call and I called the driver. After that, the customer calls me again with the same repeating complaints, and I'm just like, what? I tell him about the update, and he continues to berate me, asking why we chose this delivery driver and blah blah blah. I repeated what I said earlier, and he said, "This is still technically your fault since the driver is a subsidiary worker of the restaurant." Like I cannot pick and choose. I told him that he should contact Grubhub about his troubles with that delivery driver. I couldn't do anything on my end with Grubhub since on the tablet they don't have a customer service chat, and I couldn't give a refund since there was no button. Customer ends the call on me. Then delivery driver calls me to tell me that he's here. Then I called the customer to tell him that the delivery driver is here, and they scoff, telling me that the driver should be coming up to his apartment and not him coming down. But he goes anyways and doesn't end the call with me, so I can hear their exchange on the phone, and they are cussing each other out. Apparently, the customer gets pushed, and he said that he will file the police report, and ends the call on me again. 5 minutes later, he calls me again saying that he cannot eat the food anymore since he thinks that it is poisoned. I asked him if he wanted to make the same order, and he said yes. I told him that we would try our best, but his best bet would be to contact Grubhub directly about the situation, and they would most likely refund him and put in another order with no extra cost. He starts yelling at me on the phone again about why I can't give him a better result, and how much it is my fault that he experienced this. There's only so much that I can do on the Grubhub tablet. So I told him that I will call Grubhub about the situation and ban the driver. Ended the call again. I haven't heard from him since, but why was it me that picked up the phone call? 2. At the time, I was a 21-year-old female, had just moved to a new city, transferred with my restaurant. I was a lead server previously, so they threw me into that role in this new place. The only manager on at the time was a tiny pregnant woman who was terrified of cops. It's the end of the night, I am the only server, and somehow the restaurant fills. We had a party of 20, and then 5 other tables walk in within minutes of each other. One of the smaller tables had a cop, his wife, and their 8 to 10-year-old kid. I bring out the waters for all my tables as quickly as I can and start taking orders. Cop is already pissed that I'm not moving faster. Whatever, I can only move so fast. He orders a heavily modified chicken sandwich. Eventually, gets his foot out and the chicken sandwich has the wrong cheese on it, so he loses his shit. He starts yelling at me about being a terrible server and how I should learn to do my job. He follows me through the doors of the kitchen to scream at the cooks, who throw the blame squarely on me. I should have checked the sandwich before it left the kitchen. The cop follows me back out of the dining room. I'm trying to ignore him and keep working, but he's following me to my tables and telling them they better not tip me or he'd do something to them. He also told them that I work the corner at night and that I shouldn't quit my night job because I'm so bad at my day job. He stayed at my 20 top for a while, talking shit about me. I couldn't figure out what to do. Call the cops on a cop? My manager was hiding in the office, the cooks already threw me under the bus. I sucked it up and kept working. Eventually, all my tables had their food, and the cop gave up on harassing them. He went out to the car to wait for his family. His wife paid the bill, tipped, and they left all their food untouched on the table. As soon as he was gone, I collapsed in the kitchen crying. I'd been putting on a brave face the whole time, but I couldn't take it anymore. There were those hiccuping sobs where you can't get your breath in between. I calmed down soon and tried to put on a brave face to finish service, but the tears kept flowing silently down my face, and I couldn't make eye contact with any of my guests. Half my tables didn't really give me any tip at all. From that whole round, I made less than $50. It was my worst experience in a restaurant. Even now, after 23 years in the industry, it's still the worst. I just felt completely helpless. 3. This story takes place over 20 years ago, at a swanky country club where members include people like the family that started their eponymous department store, Bordstrom. I worked at the line at night, responsible for the sauté station. Unlike a restaurant, all the guests are regulars, and all of us front of house and back of house get to know them pretty well. Those of us in the kitchen mostly get to know about them via comments that come back from some of the front of house staff. I will say that in the main, most members were lovely people, and it was a pretty cush job. Good pay, lots of freedom to experiment in the kitchen, creating daily specials. Like seriously, I was an 18-year-old kid making whatever I dreamed up as the specials, which sometimes got quite complicated. I'd try stuff out of Thomas Keller's, at that time, newly released French laundry cookbook. I could do anything I wanted, but I digress. This club had a monthly minimum, and some members, even though they sign up knowing this, are just pissed as hell that they have to either spend their money eating at the club or pay their minimum to not eat. Typically, the last couple of nights of the month are super busy because everyone is trying to spend their monthly minimum. And best of all, it's not only busy, but a good percentage of the members on these nights aren't the pleasant members who come throughout the month, but entitled assholes who are pissed they have to be there. For these rotten members, nothing can placate them. Nothing is right. Their entire purpose isn't to dine, but to complain and make sure it's well known how unhappy they are. They have to eat this crappy food and endure the substandard service because of the monthly minimum. Now, I never witnessed a service because I was back in the kitchen, but one particular server was this 40-plus-year-old surfer dude. Guy lived in a shack, drove some beater, and had zero life goals other than to make enough to surf. He was just this happy-go-lucky guy, and he also just gave no fucks about anything. It's been so long, I'm sure I could use his name and not out the guy, but let's call him Surfer. I'm sure Surfer wasn't the world's best server because, again, no fucks given in life. So it's one of those end-of-the-month nights. And one of the members every single server has bitched about us to in the kitchen when bringing back tickets has graced us with her presence. Mrs. Can't Be Satisfied. Mrs. Can't Be Satisfied has drawn Surfer as her server, and this pairing ain't gonna end so well tonight. She's being surly, and he characteristically just isn't having it. He's only got room in his life for good vibes. I'm sure he was nonchalant and took it like a champ on the floor. But he comes back into the kitchen, and you can tell she's gotten his goat. He tells us Mrs. Can't Be Satisfied is in tonight, and reviews the very specific order she placed, riddled with, "Not like the last times." Also, she's dropped her spoon and needs another. Surfer tells us about her needing a new spoon, and then, without a word and without missing a beat, he unbuckles his pants, rubs the spoon she'd given him that she dropped on the floor around his taint, reconfigures his outfit, and then walks back to give her a new spoon. Lesson: be nice to your servers, kids. 4. This story is a two-part story in which I am not the server but instead a guest. I served my time as a server, busser, and host in a few places when I was younger, and have immense respect for waitstaff. I decided to share this story with you because another story sparked the memory. So here you go. This story takes place in the local microbrew pub in a tourist city in the southwestern US. This pub is famous with the local residents as it doesn't cater to tourists. It's located in a very out-of-the-way spot on a side street that doesn't see a lot of traffic. Nowhere near any of the tourist destinations in the city. Also for note, this pub is a full restaurant serving breakfast, lunch, and dinner with a full menu. Prologue. My roommate and I lived a few blocks from this pub and would frequent the place multiple times a week. The beer was fantastic, the atmosphere was amazing, and food was great. The service was possibly the best part of this place. Since it didn't cater to tourists, it was popular with locals, and often had local bands, local artists would be shown on the walls, etc. The service was personal on many levels, and regulars of all kinds flocked to the place. The experience was like none other I had ever encountered in any place I've ever lived since. Now let me tell you about the eldritch being. There was a server that was famous at this pub. He had been there for a couple of years, and every regular, and even many not so regular, knew him by name. There is no other way to describe this person. He is beyond mortal comprehension, and a cosmic force that decided to settle into being a waiter at a little pub in the American Southwest. This being could rule galaxies, but this is what it wants to do, so we don't question it. Without doubt, however, this being has mastered arts beyond the mortal coil. The story will elaborate on that. The story. It's a beautiful late spring weekend day back in 2010-ish. My roommate and I decide to get lunch at the pub. This is literally what we called the place. Everyone I knew in town knew what we meant when we used the term. We arrive and get seated. The place didn't have a host or a concierge, unless there was a big event happening like a popular local band, so we seat ourselves on the patio as customary and wait for the waitstaff to come by. On the patio that day was a big family, seated in the center of the patio with tables pushed together. If I recall correctly, it was about a 14 top. Included grandparents, parents, and children. Karen is seated at the head of the table, with her, presumably, husband on her right. She appears to be the eldest at the table, and is probably in her mid-60s. The table is loud, but it's the patio, and there are many other tables seated around them. As we are sitting down, Karen's table is being served their food. Server guy is their server. He's new, only been there a couple of months, and is working his way around the table, putting down plates. Karen is loudly directing him to who has what plate and where it should go. Server guy already knew the placement and was not asking, but that didn't matter to Karen. He grabs her and her husband's plate and sets them down in front of them. Karen loudly, "Excuse me, boy." "Yes, boy." "You should always serve the woman first and then the man. Not together." Server guy apologizes and continues serving plates. After finishing, server guy asks if there's anything else he can do before leaving. Karen pipes up, "You can learn how to serve a table properly for starters." This got my and my roommate's attention. Now I'm focusing on the table, and many others in their tables are now looking at them. As a regular, I had never seen these people before. By their dress, they appear to be tourists, so I don't think they had ever been to this place before. Karen's husband looks exasperated, and is looking out into the stunning view this patio offered of the nearby mountains, trying not to be in the present as much as possible. Anyway, server guy again apologizes and takes his leave. Literally 1 minute later, my roommate and I are discussing our drink choices, and Karen bellows from her chair, "Hello? We need some help here." She's so loud that every conversation on the patio stops. There is no server currently on the patio. She's yelling to the servers inside the restaurant to come to her. Enter the Eldritch Being. Eldritch Being doesn't walk so much as he flows from one place to another. Imagine the space-time continuum parting to let this being through. He flows out onto the patio and comes up behind Karen. "Is there something you need?" Eldritch Being says as he comes up. I see Karen inhale sharply with a red and puckered face. She's ready to explode. She turns, about to lay into him, and looks him in the face. Suddenly, a cosmic disjunction occurs. Karen stops, says nothing for about 5 seconds, simply staring Eldritch Being in the face. Then suddenly, as sweet as a kitten, says, "Oh, thank you. No problem, just, well, the bacon is a bit too crispy." Karen's husband has a look of utter shock. His eyes are wide. He takes a double take between his wife and Eldritch Being. Eldritch Being smiles and says, "Of course. I'll get the kitchen to make some softer bacon." He then flows back into the restaurant, and the entire rest of the night Karen is suddenly a kindly old lady, smiling and talking in normal tones with her family and the waitstaff. Even says thank you to server guy as they pack up to leave. Server guy is also our server that night, but Eldritch Being dropped by our table after Karen left to say hello. We were all on a first-name basis with him. When he arrived at the table, my roommate was expounding his love for bacon. This skinny little Irish-American guy ate 2 packs of bacon a week without fail. He had choice words about bacon being too crispy and how bacon was the ultimate food item. As Eldritch Being was arriving, he was saying those words. Bacon goes with literally anything. Nothing is not improved by bacon. Eldritch Being greets us, and we chat with him for a bit. I mention the sudden change in Karen's attitude, but he brushes it off as if it was ordinary. He then leaves after a few minutes. About 10 minutes later, our second round appears. Server guy has with him 3 pints. 1 was mine and the other 2 were for my roommate. The first drink is what my roommate ordered. The second drink was a pint of the same beer with about 6 strips of bacon in it, sticking out of the top like some morbid meat garnish. Server guy sheepishly said, "EB told me to bring this to you." Both of us are in shock. As it turns out, my roommate was wrong. Bacon is absolutely improved by beer. In fact, my roommate started pouring a little on his bacon sometimes when he ate it. Beer, on the other hand, is not improved by bacon. My roommate had a few sips and had to send it back. Five. I've been working in my current restaurant for 3 seasons and have recently been appointed to the managerial position. We've had the same head chef for those seasons. This guy's an absolute treat of a person. He has so many issues, psychologists would see him as a retirement plan. That alone would be okay, but he lets it out on everyone, particularly the servers and his kitchen team. During the first season, he and me had a fantastic work relationship. I was one of the few servers he liked, and he made it a point to spoil me with more staff food options than anyone else. Second season started off in the same way, but then his demeanor towards me changed from one day to the other. I have broken my head over trying to figure out what exactly I might have done to him to deserve this kind of treatment, to no avail. I tried everything to mend our relationship, from sharing my tips, servers get to keep all tips, kitchen is paid very well, to being extra kind. I even tried to talk to him to do things right, nothing helped. This season I almost didn't come back, because things became really icy from him to me towards the end. The owner convinced me to come back, and in the beginning it seemed like things were getting better. He was communicating with me and helping me out when I needed it. I felt like we were getting back to our old ways. This lasted until a few weeks ago, which brings me to the events of today. After a couple of weeks of borderline violent behavior, smashing plates that I brought back to the kitchen for example, he finally went too far. Last week I was serving a lovely 3-top from my home country, and they requested a special food delivery to be served today. After discussing it with the owner, I was allowed to give the order to the kitchen, and was made responsible for this party on their return. The guests came back today, expecting their specially ordered menus. I asked another manager to check in the kitchen. He comes back to me. They forgot to order it. This was beyond upsetting, and I had the pleasure to inform the guests that their menu was not available. They were understandably disappointed and got ready to leave. My manager comes back to me in a hurry. It was just some sick joke from the kitchen. Him and me were both pissed. I fixed my table, and at least the guests were happy, albeit a bit confused as to why anyone would make a joke like that in a serious restaurant. Upon further investigation, the manager found that the chef decided to mess with my table to reduce my tips because he simply does not like me. Okay then. Thanks for nothing. They still tipped me well. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to Spinning Plates, episode 175. And thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories in this video. If you could please click on the little bell next to the subscribe button and change that to all notifications. I think by default it's just set to kind of sort of maybe some notifications, and we don't want that, you know. The more Hellfreezer the better, that's what I always say. Sometimes I'm just, you know, in public, buying toilet paper. I just kind of yell at people randomly around me, the more Hellfreezer the better. It gets me very strange looks. Anyway, how's your day being? Right, let's see. We have a birthday shout out to do today, and I don't want to spoil it, but there might be a Hellfreezer's question of the day after that. Yes, very exciting. Let's see. Okay, right, birthday shout out. Here we go. Today's shout out goes to, I don't know, I've lost it. Oh, there we are. I put it in the birthdays folder. Imagine putting it in there. What am I like, eh? What am I like? Okay, today's shout out goes to Plushmores. I think I'm getting that right. I looked up a video and I found someone with that name in the video and they said Plushmores, but I'm not German, so I might be butchering that. Okay, so Bud, you were sent in a shout out by your better half. I mean, maybe I'm being presumptuous. Maybe you're the better half in the relationship, or maybe it's a relationship of equals, and wouldn't that be nice? But you were sent in a shout out, and we hope you're having a very happy birthday today. Now remember, as is mandatory, as traditional, traditional, let's not pressure people, let's not say it's mandatory, you're allowed to celebrate your birthday for a whole week if you would like to do so. So that means a week of cakes and very unhealthy foods. The unhealthy foods are, I'm afraid, mandatory. There's really no choice in that. So put the carrots down and pick the carrot cake up, that sort of thing. Okay, now before we go, before we move on to the question of the day, we're going to have a little sing-song. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Plushmores. Happy birthday to you. All right, lovely. There we go. Now let's move on to Hellfreezer's question of the day. And I actually came up with this during last night's stream. Here we go. Brace yourselves. No fighting in the comments, please. Who is, of all the currently available actors to have played the part, officially, who is the best James Bond, in your opinion? The correct answer is, of course, Timothy Dalton. But what do you think? Leave your answer in a comment below. Okay, and with that, I'm going to head off for now. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourself.